The morning had begun just like any other, a calm, bright day where the rays of sunshine gently filtered through the curtains of our home in San Diego. I had been up since dawn, carefully packing the last of our things into a set of modest travel bags, as today marked a meaningful moment for our small family. It was the first vacation my daughter, Emily, would take since her surgeries, a trip I'd promised her for 2 long years while we navigated hospital corridors, doctor appointments, and endless nights of beeping machines and sterile white walls. Emily, my precious 7-year-old, was born with spina bifida, a condition that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her small pink wheelchair, adorned with glittery stickers and a rainbow cushion she picked out herself, had become her faithful companion. And today it would accompany her 30,000 feet in the air on a trip we both desperately needed to finally leave the pain behind, if only for a while. I double-checked our flight information and reservations. The airline, SkyWest Airlines Flight 827 to Honolulu, had confirmed over the phone days before that disability accommodations were arranged, a pre-board pass, aisle wheelchair assistance, and an assigned front row seat with easy access for Emily and her chair. As a federal prosecutor, I'd learned long ago to document every conversation, every confirmation, and I had a copy of it all in my carry-on, just in case. I could never have imagined how those precautions would come to play mere hours later. By 10 a.m., we were on our way to San Diego International Airport. Emily's excitement was contagious, her laughter filling the car as she recited the names of ocean animals she planned to see in Hawaii. Her favorite was the spinner dolphin, and she eagerly showed me the new plush dolphin I'd surprised her with that morning. "He's coming too, Daddy. His name is Spinny," she declared, clutching the blue stuffed animal to her chest. My heart warmed at the sight. The TSA security process, often an ordeal for disabled passengers, went surprisingly smoothly, thanks to a kind young agent who cheerfully assisted us through the pat-down screening and wheelchair check. Emily chatted with him the entire time, earning herself a sticker and a tiny pair of plastic pilot wings. We reached gate B6 well ahead of schedule, and I approached the counter to verify our pre-board status. The gate agent, a pleasant woman named Natalie, was professional and accommodating, marking our tickets and noting Emily's chair. For a moment, it felt like everything was falling into place. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Boarding was called promptly at noon, and we were among the first to approach the jet bridge. A narrow, silver-gleamed aisle wheelchair awaited, along with 2 attendants and a middle-aged flight attendant in a navy blue uniform with bleached blonde hair and too much makeup caked onto her sharp features. The name badge read Karen M. Even then, something in her expression struck me wrong, the barely concealed disdain in her eyes as she glanced at Emily's chair, the forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. People have bad days, and I wasn't about to let anything ruin this trip for Emily. As protocol required, Emily was carefully transferred into the aisle chair. She was light as a feather, and I assisted as the 2 attendants guided her onto the aircraft. Karen M. stood by the front row, arms crossed, lips pursed as though we were inconveniencing her precious time. "She better not hold up this flight," Karen muttered under her breath, but loud enough for me to hear. I stiffened, immediately locking eyes with her. "Excuse me?" I asked sharply. Karen scoffed, turning away. The male attendant looked apologetic, whispering an apology and a promise to report it later. I made a mental note. We reached our seats, 1A and 1B, right beside the aircraft door. Emily's face was alight with excitement, pressing her nose to the window and pointing out a plane being towed by a small truck. I stowed her wheelchair in the closet just a few feet away, as directed, securing the brakes and making sure everything was within reach. Karen returned moments later, this time with an aggressively cheerful tone. Well, we've got a special little traveler today," she announced, crouching in front of Emily with a syrupy smile that felt more mocking than kind. Emily smiled politely, but clutched Spinny closer to her chest. "I'll get you all strapped in," Karen added, reaching for the seatbelt. I instinctively rose to assist, but was quickly waved off. "I've done this 100 times, sir," Karen snapped, pulling the belt. What happened next sent a bolt of fury down my spine. Rather than gently fastening the seatbelt across Emily's lap as any decent person would, Karen yanked the strap tight, then twisted it at an unnatural angle, pinning Emily's frail arm between the belt and the seat. Emily gasped, her face twisting in pain as she whimpered, "Daddy." I shot to my feet. "Enough! Stop it!" I barked, grabbing Karen's wrist and forcing her to release the belt. Emily was visibly shaking, tears welling in her large brown eyes. Karen straightened, glaring at me with open hostility. "I'm following regulations," she hissed. "Maybe if you taught your little brat to sit still, we wouldn't have this problem." The entire front cabin fell silent. A nearby passenger, a woman in her 20s, stared in shock, while another older man muttered, "Unbelievable." I knelt beside Emily, inspecting her arm. Red marks had already formed where the belt had pressed too tightly against her tender skin. I gently cradled her against me, feeling her tiny frame tremble as she clung to me. That was it. My patience had reached its breaking point. I demanded to speak to the captain immediately. Karen rolled her eyes. "The captain's busy," she barked. "You people always think you're special." Her voice practically dripped with venom. I pulled out my federal ID wallet, flipping it open to reveal my badge and identification as Assistant U.S. Attorney Nathan Cole. Karen's face visibly paled, a faint tremor flickering through her posture. "Now," I said, my voice low and deadly. Within moments, the male attendant hurried up the aisle, whispering urgently to the cockpit. The captain emerged seconds later, a sturdy, authoritative man named Captain Reynolds. I calmly but firmly detailed the incident, pointing out the fresh marks on Emily's arm and repeating Karen's vile comments. Multiple passengers nearby corroborated my account, including a retired nurse and a young mother traveling with her child. Captain Reynolds turned to Karen, his expression like ice. "Is this true?" he demanded. Karen stammered, fumbling for words. I didn't mean," she was fidgeting. "I was trying to." Her excuses crumbled in the face of witness testimony. The captain wasted no time. "You are relieved of duty. Return to the terminal immediately. Security will meet you at the gate." Karen's face went beet red, her lips curling into a sneer as she stormed off the plane, a chorus of quiet applause breaking out from several rows behind us. Emily wiped her tears, watching as the woman disappeared down the jet bridge. "Is she gone, Daddy?" she asked in a small voice. I hugged her tight. "She's gone, sweetheart. Nobody's going to hurt you now." A supervisor from the airline met us at the gate before takeoff, profusely apologizing and offering to delay the flight if needed. Emily, brave as ever, insisted she still wanted to go to Hawaii. The crew replaced Karen with a backup attendant, a kind older woman named Marcy, who immediately befriended Emily and made her a paper flower. I filed a formal complaint through legal channels, knowing Karen would face not only termination, but federal scrutiny for assaulting a disabled minor on a commercial aircraft. As we finally took off, the clouds parting beneath us, I held Emily's hand tightly, silently vowing that no one would ever lay a hand on my daughter again. The rest of the flight passed smoothly, but I knew this was just the beginning of a much larger reckoning that Karen M. would soon face once my office made a few calls. Emily fell asleep against my shoulder as we soared over the Pacific, clutching Spinny and wearing a bright pair of new pilot wings Marcy pinned to her shirt. I closed my eyes, feeling both the ache of earlier fury and the overwhelming love for my daughter. The battle wasn't over, but today, we'd claimed a small victory. The warm hum of the aircraft engines lulled the cabin into a strange, gentle quiet as the plane sailed smoothly over the Pacific. But for me, there was no peace to be found in the dull, rhythmic thrum. Though Emily had finally drifted off to sleep against my shoulder, her tiny face pressed against Spinny the dolphin plush, I sat rigidly in my seat, my mind a tempest of fury, disgust, and disbelief at what had transpired just an hour earlier. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the sickening, callous way that flight attendant Karen had tightened that seatbelt with such reckless force, twisting it cruelly against my disabled daughter's arm, her venomous words that followed, and the sheer gall of someone entrusted with passenger care behaving like a heartless tyrant. Every time the memory surfaced, I found my fists clenching, jaw tightening, the protective instinct of a father and the wrath of a federal prosecutor simmering just beneath the surface. Though Karen had been removed from the aircraft by Captain Reynolds, I knew this situation was far from over. People like her often wormed their way out of consequences with weak apologies or union protections. Not this time. Not with me. Not after what she did to my daughter. I reached into my bag and retrieved my leather-bound notepad, already drafting the preliminary details of a formal report and complaint to the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection, as well as to the Department of Justice's Disability Rights section. I jotted down witness names, seat numbers, flight details, and a precise timeline of the events, including the exact moment Karen had been removed from the plane. Cross-referenced with the boarding manifest Captain Reynolds had allowed me to briefly inspect. I wasn't just Emily's father, I was Assistant U.S. Attorney Nathan Cole, and I specialized in civil rights violations. I'd prosecuted high-ranking officials for lesser abuses than this. The idea of someone like Karen M. working in a public-facing, federally regulated capacity and endangering a disabled minor wasn't just a personal offense to me. It was a professional disgrace I would see remedied with extreme prejudice. I flagged down Marcy, the replacement attendant who'd taken Karen's place, with a warm, maternal presence. She came over immediately, sensing my concern. "Is everything all right, Mr. Cole?" she asked softly, glancing at the sleeping Emily and lowering her voice. "Thank you again for stepping in, Marcy." I began, my tone formal but not unkind. "I'm preparing an incident report for federal review, and I'd appreciate if you could provide a written statement as well once we land. It will be confidential and protected under whistleblower statutes." Marcy's kind face hardened with a fierce resolve I hadn't expected from someone of her gentle demeanor. "You'll have it, sir. What Karen did was unforgivable. I've worked 20 years in the air, and I've never seen such cruelty. That child didn't deserve a single second of that treatment." She squeezed my shoulder and offered a reassuring nod before returning to the galley. I made another note to recommend her for commendation. The hours passed slowly, each moment thick with the quiet tension that lingered after confrontation. Several passengers who had witnessed the incident stopped by our row discreetly, offering kind words, handwritten notes, and even one elderly woman's rosary beads for Emily's protection. A young mother, seated 2 rows behind us, slipped me a business card. She was an attorney specializing in disability advocacy and offered her services pro bono should we require any additional legal support. The solidarity of strangers brought a bittersweet warmth to my heart. A reminder that while people like Karen existed, so too did decent souls who wouldn't stand by and allow injustice to pass unchallenged. I kept these tokens in a side pocket of my bag, knowing Emily would want to see them later. At long last, the aircraft began its descent into Daniel K. Inouye International Airport. The seatbelt sign illuminated, and I carefully buckled Emily without waking her. The light dimmed across the cabin, and the island lights twinkled below us like scattered jewels across a black velvet ocean. For a brief, precious moment, the nightmare of earlier seemed miles away. Upon landing, the airline's ground supervisor, a tall, meticulously dressed man named Marcus Green, personally met us at the aircraft door. His expression was a practiced blend of professionalism and contrition, though I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes as he crouched beside Emily's chair and addressed her softly. "Miss Emily," he said kindly, "I want to apologize on behalf of our airline for everything that happened today. You are incredibly brave, and you didn't deserve what that woman did. We have a special lei and a surprise waiting for you downstairs." Emily, now awake and clutching Spinny, smiled shyly. I thanked Marcus, but wasted no time diving into business. "I need a direct line to your legal counsel and your corporate risk management office," I informed him. "This isn't being handled internally or swept under the rug. I will personally be involving the Department of Justice and filing charges under the Air Carrier Access Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act." Marcus nodded solemnly, handing me a card with direct contacts and promising full cooperation. He also confirmed that Karen M. had been terminated effective immediately upon her removal from the aircraft and was currently detained by airport security, awaiting formal statements and potential charges. That was good, but nowhere near enough. As we proceeded through the terminal, a photographer from the airline's PR department discreetly captured images of Emily receiving a flower lei and a gift bag, trying to salvage the company's image. I'd allowed it, but made it clear through clenched teeth that any public use of those images without express consent would result in swift litigation. Emily, for her part, delighted in the attention, innocently unaware of the larger storm raging around her. We were escorted to a VIP lounge where refreshments and a pediatric nurse waited to examine Emily's arm. The nurse, a kind woman named Lei, confirmed mild bruising and offered medical documentation for our case file. I secured digital copies immediately. It was in that quiet, private lounge that my phone finally connected to the network and the deluge of messages and voicemails came pouring in from my chief of staff, fellow prosecutors, local FBI contacts, and even a regional ADA I'd worked cases with before. Word had spread quickly. One of the passengers had apparently live-tweeted the incident mid-flight, and the post had gone viral within hours, complete with grainy photos of Karen being marched off the aircraft and Emily's tear-streaked face. By the time we landed, hashtag Justice for Emily was trending on multiple platforms. It was then that the real legal machine began to turn. I made a series of immediate calls, first to my chief of staff, instructing her to initiate a formal inquiry with the Department of Transportation's Civil Rights Division. Next, to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of California to establish jurisdiction for any federal criminal charges related to assault under 49 U.S. Code Section 46504 and disability interference statutes. Lastly, to a trusted contact within the FAA to notify them of a likely safety and conduct violation by a crew member on a commercial aircraft. Each conversation was clinical, precise, and efficient. This wasn't personal revenge. It was the systematic dismantling of an individual unfit for the public trust, executed within the bounds of federal authority. Emily sipped pineapple juice beside me as I worked, occasionally giggling at a cartoon playing on a mounted television. I marveled at her resilience. Within 2 hours, a formal legal hold had been placed on all personnel records and flight logs from SkyWest Airlines for that day. Karen M.'s employee file was subpoenaed, revealing a disturbing pattern of prior complaints for documented incidents of misconduct, 2 involving rude or dismissive behavior towards disabled or elderly passengers, none of which had escalated to this degree, but enough to paint a damning portrait of negligence by airline management. The revelation infuriated me further. Had they acted earlier, my daughter wouldn't have suffered. That negligence would also be addressed in the civil complaint my office would soon draft. The airport police detained Karen for several more hours under suspicion of simple assault and federal rights interference. She was eventually released on bail, but not before being served with a restraining order barring her from approaching Emily or any member of my family. I was informed that the media had caught wind of the incident thanks to the viral post and had begun to circle both the airport and SkyWest's headquarters. Several local affiliates requested interviews, which I declined for now, preferring to let the legal system do its work. That evening, Emily and I finally checked into our hotel, overlooking the crystalline waters of Waikiki Beach. I watched as she wheeled herself excitedly to the balcony, marveling at the ocean view and lights shimmering across the water. For the first time since that wretched incident, I allowed myself a small measure of peace. I knew we would still enjoy this vacation. Emily deserved that much, and no one, not Karen, not the airline's prior negligence, would rob her of it. Tomorrow, we would visit the aquarium, the Spinner Dolphin Sanctuary, and the pineapple farm she'd been dreaming of. But tonight, we rested, knowing that far away, in offices and courtrooms and federal agencies, the wheels of justice had begun to turn with unrelenting force. I would make certain of it. For Emily, for every child like her, and for every family who'd ever been made to feel small or unwelcome because of a disability, the reckoning had begun. and it would be thorough, swift, and absolute. The following morning in Honolulu dawned with the kind of breathtaking serenity that only a place like Hawaii could offer. The soft rustling of palm trees and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore blended into a melody of peace that should have brought a sense of healing to Emily and me after the ordeal we'd endured the day before. But peace is often an elusive thing when there's unfinished business still gnawing at your sense of justice, and while Emily slept in, curled beneath a fluffy blanket clutching her dolphin plush, I was already seated at the balcony table with my laptop open, a cup of strong Kona coffee in hand, and a stack of legal documents spread before me. The situation had developed faster than I could have anticipated. The viral post of the incident aboard SkyWest Flight 827 had not only captured national attention overnight, but had drawn the scrutiny of federal oversight bodies, disability rights organizations, and investigative journalists, each eager to peel back the layers of negligence and misconduct that had allowed a woman like Karen M. to remain in a position of authority for as long as she had. The Department of Transportation had opened a formal inquiry within hours of my initial complaint, and my phone buzzed with updates from contacts inside the DOJ and FAA, both eager to contribute to what was quickly becoming a precedent-setting case. Before the sun was fully up, I'd received confirmation that Karen M. had retained an attorney, a mid-tier defense lawyer known locally for representing rogue cops and airline employees accused of misconduct. The irony wasn't lost on me. According to my sources, Karen was attempting to downplay the incident as a misunderstanding, claiming that Emily had been uncooperative and that she had merely acted in accordance with safety regulations. It was a desperate, pitiful defense, one that crumbled under the weight of witness testimonies, photographic evidence of the bruises on Emily's arm, and the damning personnel records subpoenaed the night before. SkyWest's legal counsel, realizing the sheer magnitude of the public relations and liability disaster unfolding, had already approached my office through a third-party negotiator, hinting at an offer for an out-of-court settlement. They wanted this to go away quickly, quietly, and without further damage to their brand. But I wasn't interested in hush money. This was bigger than one lawsuit. This was about systemic negligence, about ensuring no other disabled child was ever mistreated in the skies again, and about sending a message that civil rights violations would never be reduced to a line item on a corporate ledger. As the morning progressed, I drafted the initial federal complaint, meticulously detailing every aspect of the incident. The physical assault on a disabled minor, the verbal abuse, the reckless endangerment, and the airline's repeated failure to address a known risk. I cited violations under the Air Carrier Access Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and several FAA regulations concerning the treatment of passengers requiring special accommodations. I included witness affidavits, already gathered, medical documentation from the nurse who had treated Emily upon landing, and digital records of prior passenger complaints against Karen M. The case, even at this early stage, was airtight. By noon, the complaint had been formally filed with the South District Court for the Southern District of California, and a copy sent to the Department of Transportation's Aviation Consumer Protection Division. The media, ravenous for updates, swarmed every angle of the story. Morning news shows ran segments featuring disability rights, advocates decrying the incident, and legal analysts speculating on the penalties SkyWest might face. Social media campaigns surged, with hashtags like hashtag Protect Disabled Passengers and hashtag Justice for Emily trending internationally. Meanwhile, Emily and I kept our promise to ourselves. We left the hotel behind for the day and explored the island with a kind-hearted local guide named Keahi, who insisted on helping load Emily's wheelchair into his van and showing us the best wheelchair-accessible parts of Oahu. We visited the Waikiki Aquarium, where Emily's face lit up at the sight of spinner dolphins performing playful flips in their open-air lagoon. She laughed with unrestrained joy as one of the dolphins seemed to nod directly at her. And Keahi joked that the dolphin must have heard her giggles from a mile away. We toured the pineapple fields, Emily sampling fresh-cut fruit, so sweet it made her eyes widen, and she insisted on sending a box home to Grandma. For a little while, I allowed myself to believe the worst was behind us. But by mid-afternoon, as we returned to our hotel, my phone was ablaze with new developments. Karen MS personal history had become a matter of public record once her personnel file was subpoenaed, and local journalists unearthed a string of prior infractions not previously disclosed, allegations of verbal abuse towards elderly passengers, failure to assist a disabled veteran, and an incident years prior where she had reportedly threatened a mother traveling with a special needs child. Each incident had been quietly buried by SkyWest's Human Resources Department, settled privately without any meaningful consequence. The revelation ignited a firestorm of outrage. Advocacy groups demanded accountability, not only for Karen, but for every executive who had allowed her to continue working unchecked. SkyWest's CEO, under pressure, issued a public statement of apology and promised a full internal review, though by then it was clear the company's survival would hinge on more than empty words. Later that evening, as Emily slept peacefully in our suite, a secured video conference call was arranged between myself, representatives from the DOJ Civil Rights Division, officials from the Department of Transportation, and the FAA's Office of Civil Rights. Together, we coordinated a multi-agency effort to launch a comprehensive review of airline compliance with disability regulations nationwide. The case had become the catalyst for broader reform, something I hadn't expected but welcomed wholeheartedly. I proposed new mandatory sensitivity and emergency training protocols for all flight staff, compulsory reporting of passenger rights violations to federal oversight bodies, and harsher penalties for both individual offenders and corporate enablers. The agency heads were unanimous in their support. By the time the meeting adjourned well after midnight, I felt the exhaustion seep deep into my bones, but it was tempered by a profound sense of vindication. A single, vile act had triggered a reckoning long overdue, and though it had come at the cost of my daughter's tears, it would ultimately spare countless others. The next morning brought a new development. A formal letter of termination had been delivered to Karen M., citing gross misconduct, endangerment of a disabled minor, and violations of both FAA policy and the Air Carrier Access Act. She would no longer work in aviation, banned from any commercial carrier operating under U.S. jurisdiction. Moreover, the federal assault charge remained active. She faced a court date within weeks, and the likelihood of a civil suit, not only from my office, but from other victims who had come forward in the wake of the incident. I received emails from two families whose disabled children had suffered under Karen's negligence on previous flights, each prepared to testify or submit written statements. SkyWest's attorneys, growing increasingly desperate, doubled their settlement offer, promising to overhaul corporate policy and fund a nationwide disability advocacy initiative in Emily's name if we agreed to withdraw federal charges. I rejected the offer. This wasn't about money, it was about principle, and no child deserved to be a bargaining chip in a corporate damage control strategy. That evening, Emily and I stood together on the beach as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky painted in brilliant shades of orange and violet. She looked up at me, her small hand finding mine. "Are the bad people gone now, Daddy?" she asked, her voice hopeful. I knelt beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "They're gone, sweetheart, I promised, and they're never coming back." She smiled, pointing out towards the ocean. "Look, Daddy, dolphins." In the distance, sleek silhouettes broke the surface of the water, gliding gracefully through the waves. It felt like a sign, a moment of grace hard-won after days of battle. That night, as Emily drifted off to sleep, her dolphin plush clutched to her chest, I finished drafting a joint proposal for federal legislation tentatively titled the Emily Coal Passenger Protection Act. The bill, if passed, would enforce stricter protections for disabled air travelers, mandate publicly accessible records of staff misconduct, and establish a national reporting hotline for incidents of abuse or negligence. I sent copies to the DOJ, the FAA, and to two senators known for their work on disability rights. The response was swift, and within hours, a congressional subcommittee had requested a preliminary hearing. The wheels of change turned slowly, but they were turning. And it all began because one little girl had dared to smile through her tears, refusing to let cruelty dim her light. The days that followed unfolded like something out of a legal drama, Though it wasn't fiction, it was real, raw, and carried the weight of something greater than any individual grievance. By the time Emily and I returned home to San Diego, the incident aboard SkyWest Flight 827 had transcended isolated outrage and become a nationwide rallying point for disability rights in air travel. Local news crews were waiting at the gate when we landed, and though I shielded Emily from their cameras and questions, their presence was evidence of the cultural nerve the story had struck. My office was a whirlwind of activity as formal litigation commenced, both criminal and civil, and every federal agency involved was now operating under heightened scrutiny. Karen M., the woman whose careless cruelty had set this chain of events in motion, was formally indicted on 3 counts: assault on a disabled minor under federal jurisdiction, interference with the rights of a passenger with a disability under the Air Carrier Access Act, and endangerment under FAA safety regulations. The weight of those charges alone carried a maximum sentence of 15 years if convicted, and the evidence against her was so comprehensive, so meticulously documented, that even her own defense attorney reportedly advised her to consider a plea deal. But as some people do when cornered, Karen chose defiance. She appeared in court during the preliminary hearing with an air of smug indignation, a sneer plastered on her face as though the ordeal she had inflicted on my child was some minor inconvenience blown out of proportion by hysterical overreaction. Her lawyer argued she had been following safety protocols, claimed Emily had been uncooperative, and attempted to frame the bruising as an unavoidable result of turbulence, despite every log and statement proving no such turbulence had occurred during boarding. The presiding judge, a stern, no-nonsense federal magistrate named Evelyn Ward, was having none of it. This court, she declared from the bench, will not tolerate attempts to shift blame onto a disabled child for the abuse and negligence of an adult in a position of public trust. The words rang through the courtroom like a gavel blow, and for the first time, Karen's composure cracked. She fidgeted, her gaze darting, the certainty of impunity slipping from her grasp. Witness after witness testified to the events aboard that plane. The elderly passenger who had called her behavior monstrous, the young mother who captured the viral photo, Marcy, the replacement attendant who described Karen's disdain for Emily and disabled passengers in general, and even the airline's own ground supervisor Marcus Green, who recounted Karen's removal from duty. The medical report from Honolulu's airport nurse detailing Emily's bruises sealed the case. It was an unrelenting storm of damning facts, and no defense could withstand its fury. SkyWest Airlines, desperate to distance itself from the debacle, fired multiple mid-level supervisors who had buried previous complaints against Karen, overhauled its internal reporting systems, and formally apologized to my family in writing and at a press conference streamed nationwide. They committed $10 million to a newly established Passenger Dignity and Disability Rights Fund, pledging to sponsor training programs, assistive technology upgrades on aircraft, and community outreach initiatives. For Emily and me, no dollar amount could undo what had happened, but it was a step toward ensuring no other family would suffer the way we had. Still, justice demanded more than corporate pledges. It demanded consequences. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before returning a unanimous verdict, guilty on all counts. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Ward pronounced sentence: 6 years in federal prison without parole, mandatory inclusion on a national transportation industry ban list, and permanent disqualification from any future position involving the care or supervision of minors or disabled individuals. Karen M. wept as the sentence was read, though whether it was from remorse or self-pity, no one could say. She was led from the courtroom in shackles, her once defiant expression reduced to hollow defeat. In the weeks that followed, Emily's story continued to resonate. Disability advocacy groups awarded her honorary certificates and invited her to appear at awareness events. My proposed legislation, the Emily Coal Passenger Protection Act, gained bipartisan support and advanced through committee with remarkable speed, propelled by public outcry and political pressure from both sides of the aisle. National news networks ran follow-up stories, profiling families who came forward with their own tales of mistreatment in air travel. Some recounted being ignored when requesting assistance, others denied basic accommodations, and in one tragic instance, a disabled veteran left stranded overnight when staff refused to load his wheelchair onto a connecting flight. The legislation passed the House with overwhelming support and proceeded to the Senate, where it passed unanimously, a rare feat in a divided chamber. The bill was signed into law in a public ceremony where Emily, in her pink wheelchair adorned with fresh dolphin stickers, was recognized as its namesake. She beamed with pride, wearing a brand new pair of pilot wings, this time pinned directly to her chest by the Secretary of Transportation. In practical terms, the new law mandated rigorous new training for all airline staff, expanded reporting requirements for incidents of disability rights violations, introduced public access personnel conduct records for aircrew, and established a federal passenger rights violations hotline. Airlines were now required to accommodate requests like Emily's pre-board seating and accessible storage as non-negotiable legal standards rather than discretionary courtesies. Violations carried steep fines and automatic federal review. Emily's bravery had rewritten policy. Back in our hometown, life gradually settled into a new rhythm. Emily returned to school, her classmates cheering when she rolled into the classroom after a trip. She proudly showed off her pilot wings and told them about the dolphins she'd seen and the friends she made in Hawaii. As for me, I returned to my work at the U.S. Attorney's office, though my focus sharpened with new clarity. I took on more disability rights cases, pursuing them with the same relentless intensity that had fueled me in the fight against Karen M. I spoke at conferences, helped draft additional regulatory guidelines, and offered legal counsel to families navigating similar injustices. Our story, once a personal ordeal, had become a symbol of resilience and accountability, and though the road had been harrowing, it forged bonds with people I'd never otherwise have met: parents, veterans, caregivers, activists, all united in the cause of dignity for those whose needs had long been overlooked. Every time a new case landed on my desk, I saw Emily's face not tear-streaked and afraid, but grinning beside a spinner dolphin, the sun glinting off the ocean, her wheelchair tracks marking the sand. In quieter moments, I reflected on the simple, immutable truth that no amount of legal victories or policy changes could ever erase the cruelty inflicted upon my daughter that day. Yet it mattered that we fought. It mattered that we won. And it mattered that Emily, in her innocence and unshaken spirit, taught the world a lesson no law or courtroom could deliver as powerfully as her enduring smile. On the anniversary of our trip, Emily and I returned to Hawaii, this time greeted by the very airline staff who once failed us but had since transformed under the weight of accountability. The new flight attendants, trained under the standards set by the law, carrying Emily's name, welcomed her with genuine warmth. They placed her in a front row seat beside me with care, treating her with the respect and dignity she deserved from the start. As the plane took off into the sky, Emily looked out at the clouds and squeezed my hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "we fixed it, didn't we?" I smiled, my throat tight, my heart full. "We sure did, kiddo. We sure did."